A 3-year-old girl abandoned at a train station. Her mother found lifeless in the trunk of a car. And the prime suspect? Her own father, a self-proclaimed Tai Chi King who had fled across the Pacific with a bizarre and chilling story to tell. The morning of September 15, 2007, cast a cool, early spring light over Flinders Street Station in Melbourne, Australia. Amidst the morning rush of commuters, a small figure stood out. A little girl of Asian descent was standing alone, crying quietly. Concerned travelers quickly alerted station staff. As they tried to comfort her, they realized she didn't speak a word of English. Their initial assumption was simple: a child separated from her family in the chaos. They brought her to the station office, noting the brand of her clothing, Pumpkin Patch. Affectionately, they began calling her Little Pumpkin. The staff turned to the station's security footage, hoping to spot a frantic parent searching for their lost child. Instead, what they found was deeply unsettling. The footage showed a middle-aged man pulling a suitcase with Little Pumpkin in tow. He walks into the station, crouches down to say a few words to the girl, then, without a backward glance, he ascends an escalator and vanishes from the frame. He never returned. The footage suggested this wasn't an accident. This was an abandonment. The station staff immediately notified the police, unknowingly pulling the first thread of a case that would shock Chinese communities in both Australia and the United States, and expose the dark heart of a so-called martial arts master. Police investigators moved quickly. Through inquiries and international cooperation, they identified the little girl. Her name was Chloe Shui, a 3-year-old citizen of New Zealand. The man who left her was her 53-year-old father, a Chinese martial arts instructor named Nathan Xu. Australian police delved into flight records, uncovering a disturbing timeline. On September 13th, 2 days before Chloe was found, Nathan and his daughter had flown from Auckland, New Zealand, to Melbourne, Australia, on New Zealand passports. Then, on September 15th, just 2 hours after leaving his daughter at the station, Nathan Xu boarded an international flight alone, destination Los Angeles, California. His actions were cold, calculated, and screamed of a deliberate plan to discard his 3-year-old child. But a chilling question lingered. If his only goal was to abandon his daughter, why fly all the way to Australia to do it? And more urgently, where was her mother? Australian authorities relayed their findings to the New Zealand police, hoping they could locate Chloe's mother. 2 days later, on September 17th, Auckland police officers arrived at Nathan Xu's home to conduct a welfare check. They soon learned that the girl's mother had been missing for several days. A sense of dread began to permeate the investigation. They secured a search warrant and began a meticulous search of the Xu residence. That evening, after 5 p.m., their worst fears were realized. In the trunk of Nathan Xu's Honda sedan, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed her identity: Annie Liu, Nathan Xu's wife. The scene in the trunk was grim. Annie was dressed in a nightgown with no underwear beneath it. A pair of red panties lay discarded near her body. A yellow tie was wrapped tightly around her neck. The medical examiner determined that Annie Liu had been dead for about a week. There were no signs of sexual assault, and the cause of death was asphyxiation. The yellow tie that had ended her life belonged to her husband, Nathan Xue. The red panties found nearby yielded a complex DNA profile. DNA from 3 different men was present. One major contributor was Nathan Xue. The identities of the other 2 men were unknown. For now, the events that transpired after her death remained a mystery, but the sequence was damning. Nathan Xu's wife was dead, and he had flown with their daughter to Australia, abandoned her, and fled to the United States. Every unusual action pointed to one person. Nathan Xu was the #1 suspect in his wife's murder. Once he landed in the United States, Nathan Xu disappeared. The case sent shockwaves through the Chinese community in New Zealand, where Shui, despite his controversial reputation, was a known figure. He was born in 1954 in Zhulu County, Hebei, China, and grew up in Liaoning Province. From a young age, he was obsessed with martial arts, beginning his training at the age of 8 under various masters. He built a small reputation for himself in the martial arts circles of northern China, eventually styling himself as the 6th-generation successor of a particular Tai Chi lineage. In the modern era, such titles are often just for show, but in the cultural context of that time, it carried significant weight. In 1983, at 29 years old, he grandiosely claimed to have been ranked among the top 10 martial artists in China, hailed internationally as a Sifu, or master. He even published an autobiography, audaciously titled The Tai Chi King. Riding this wave of self-generated hype, Shui opened a martial arts school, attracting students and collecting tuition fees. Among his pupils were some well-known figures in northeastern Chinese society, which brought him a degree of fame and fortune. His career was thriving, and he soon had a nice car and a comfortable life, all built alongside his first wife. However, his students gradually began to see through the facade. Their master was all talk, a performer with no real combat experience. This became his greatest weakness. The number of students dwindled, the school's revenue dried up, and it eventually became unsustainable. But Shui had heard that his brand of martial arts was highly regarded overseas. He decided to head west. In 1996, at over 40 years old and recently divorced from his first wife, Nathan Shui immigrated to Auckland, New Zealand. He brought his daughter from that first marriage with him. There, he established a martial arts center called the Internal Strength Martial Arts Association. Each year, he would organize a few martial arts demonstrations to attract new members. He even attempted to teach in the United States, but failed to gain any traction. The Chinese community held mixed opinions about Shui's skills and character. Many saw him as a braggart, a man with no real talent. The consensus was that Shu presented himself as a great master, but he could never retain students for long, no matter the country. The primary reason was his personality. He was crude, arrogant, and had an iron-fisted need for control. He had been physically abusive in his first marriage, a trauma that deeply affected his eldest daughter. When she was old enough, she left and never looked back, severing all contact. It was during this time in New Zealand that Shu met a young woman from China named Annie Liu. Annie was born in 1980 in Changsha, Hunan. Her mother was a senior manager at a large company, and Annie herself had a good, stable job back home. But she was ambitious. She wanted to further her education and decided to study abroad. In 2002, at just 22 years old, she arrived in New Zealand. Her dream quickly soured. She discovered she'd been swindled by an immigration agent. Instead of a prestigious university, she was enrolled in a basic language school. She had 6 months to pass an English proficiency exam, or her visa would expire and she'd be sent home. This was a monumental task, especially living within the Chinese community where English was rarely spoken. Then, a car accident left her injured, and the 6-month deadline flew by. Her visa was about to expire, she hadn't passed the test, and in a desperate attempt to get an extension, she was scammed by another agent. Most of the money she had brought with her was gone. Facing the humiliation of returning home a failure, Annie was unwilling to give up. The lonely and helpless young woman decided she would do whatever it took to stay. She began living illegally with no fixed address. In October 2002, unable to afford her rent, Annie Liu was searching for cheaper accommodation when she met Nathan Shu, a landlord offering a room at a low price in Auckland. After hearing her story, Shu told her she didn't need to pay rent, she could just help with cleaning the house. Annie was incredibly grateful for this man's generosity and moved in. But the 48-year-old landlord wasn't just playing the role of a savior. He wanted to possess the beautiful young woman, 26 years his junior. To the surprise of many, Annie quickly accepted his advances. She was only 4 years older than his estranged daughter. It's hard to imagine this was true love. At the time, Shui's martial arts club was still limping along, and for Annie, a relationship with him meant financial security while she navigated her precarious life abroad. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. They began living together, and by early 2003, when they married, Annie was already pregnant. Later that year, she gave birth to a daughter, the little girl who would become known to the world as Little Pumpkin, Chloe. By 2006, Nathan Shu was over 50. The physical decline that comes with age affects everyone, even martial artists, especially one whose skills were more performative than real. His martial arts center was now a hollow shell, a name with no value. That same year, a significant change occurred in Annie's life. She received her permanent residency, her green card. She was no longer entirely dependent on her husband. This shifted the dynamic of their relationship entirely. She was no longer the compliant, submissive wife. She began to push back, even refusing to be intimate with him. For Jay, a man reeling from career failure, this defiance was an intolerable blow to his ego. His response was violence. He frequently beat her, forbade her from leaving the house, and prevented her from having friends. He even confiscated her passport. In September 2006, unable to bear the domestic abuse any longer, Annie decided to flee. While searching for her passport, she stumbled upon a handgun hidden in the house. Terrified, she was discovered by Shui, who launched into another brutal assault, this time threatening her with a knife. Annie seized a moment of opportunity, flung open the door, and ran to a neighbor's house for help. The neighbor called the police, and Nathan Shui was arrested. As officers led him away, he was still shouting threats at Annie, vowing that he would kill her. Annie and Chloe were taken to a local women's shelter. The staff noted her split lip and the dark bruises around her eyes. Mother and daughter were given food and a safe place to hide for a month. During this time, Annie filed for a personal protection order. Shu faced assault charges, but in the end, Annie withdrew the complaint. She couldn't bring herself to put him in prison, hoping they could separate amicably. Later, in November 2006, Annie took her daughter and returned to her hometown of Changsha, China, where she stayed for 7 months. While she was away, Shui started dating another woman, but the relationship was short-lived. After the breakup, he began contacting Annie repeatedly, swearing he would never be violent again and promising to remarry her in a proper ceremony. His words moved her. After 7 months in Changsha, Annie Lu brought her daughter back to New Zealand. By this point, the martial arts center had completely failed. Desperate for a new venture, Shu had entered the publishing industry in late 2006, becoming the publisher of a Chinese-language newspaper he named Chinatown Weekly. But he knew nothing about running a newspaper, nothing about business. The venture was a financial disaster, sinking him deep into debt. He was forced to declare bankruptcy. After this latest failure, Shui was at the lowest point of his life. Just 3 months after Annie's return to New Zealand, the violence began again. He assaulted her, this time threatening her with a sword. Their daughter cried and ran towards her mother, only to be kicked away by her father. Annie called the police again. Mother and daughter were once more placed in a shelter. The police confiscated Hui's passport and the sword, ordering him to complete a family violence intervention course. But for Annie, there was no hope left for reconciliation. She no longer felt safe in Auckland. In June 2007, she took her daughter and rented a home in the capital city, Wellington, officially beginning a life separated from her husband. In July, She created a profile on a dating website under the screen name The Other Side of the Flower. On her blog, on August 29th, she wrote a diary entry detailing a secret affair in Wellington. He was lonely. I was lonely. Two people consumed by fire. So, everything that needed to happen happened. We lived happily like a family for nearly 2 months. In a later entry, after leaving Wellington, she wrote, "A week before his wife was due to return, I drove away from our love nest, away from his city." This diary entry was a clear admission that she had been in a relationship with a married man. Xiu suspected something was wrong. His wife was living away from him for 2 months without needing any money for rent. The thought enraged him. He complained to a friend from his hometown in Liaoning, saying that in his entire life, no one had ever deceived him except his wife, Annie Lu. He fumed that she wasn't living with him sincerely but was just using him to gain legal status in New Zealand, while he had to bear all the expenses. It was likely during this period of intense jealousy and humiliation that the idea of murder began to form in his mind. Police confirmed the last time Annie Lu was seen alive was around 4 p.m. on September 11, 2007, at a suburban childcare center in Auckland. After that, the timeline goes dark. It's unknown what methods Xie used to lure her back to their home. On September 12th, Annie's mother called from China. Xue answered the phone. He told his mother-in-law that Annie had gone to Wellington for a party. After Annie was dead, Xue went to the local authorities and retrieved his confiscated passport. The very next day, September 13th, he took his daughter and flew to Melbourne, Australia. He had contacted a travel agency wanting to book a flight for that same day to Los Angeles. The agent informed him the earliest available flight wasn't until September 15th, 2 days later. His original plan was likely to flee to America with his daughter, but somewhere during those 2 days, he changed his mind. Fleeing with a toddler would be a burden, and so Nathan Xue made the heartless decision to leave her behind. In the aftermath of the discovery, Xue's older daughter from his first marriage offered to care for her younger half-sister, Chloe. The Chinese embassy intervened, helping to bring Annie Lu's mother from Changsha to New Zealand to take custody of her granddaughter and to bring her daughter's ashes home. The Chinese community in New Zealand raised money to help Little Pumpkin, but her grandmother graciously declined. The tragedy had filled her with a profound sense of guilt. She had believed that sending her daughter abroad would lead to a better life, never imagining it would end like this. Due to their infrequent contact, she had no idea what her daughter had endured over the years. She knew nothing of the violent marriage and had never even met Nathan Xue. After landing in the US, Nathan Xue became a ghost. American law enforcement issued a nationwide warrant for his arrest. At one point, he was listed among America's most wanted fugitives, sharing a list with figures like Al Capone, Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. A year passed. On February 28, 2008, in the suburban city of Chamblee, just outside Atlanta, Georgia, a Chinese restaurant chef named Sam Wu was reading the newspaper. He saw an article about a fugitive, Nathan Xue, with a $10,000 reward for his capture. When Sam saw the photo, he was stunned. It was Old Tang, a man who worked at the same restaurant. Sam Wu instantly recalled suspicious things about this man. His luggage was always packed, never unpacked, as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. Old Tang was a light sleeper, waking at the slightest sound. He claimed to be from Hebei, but his accent was all wrong. Sam was certain this was the fugitive. He immediately called 4 friends, fellow countrymen from Qingdao. Among the 5 of them, 3 were delivery drivers for the restaurant. One was a former provincial soccer player, another a former soldier, and one had won medals in wrestling. They were all physically capable men, but they didn't speak English well. After 3 failed attempts to clearly explain the situation to the police over the phone, they decided to take matters into their own hands. The 5 men devised a plan. Sam Wu, the smallest of the group, would go to the police station in person while the other 4 would apprehend Old Tang. That night, the 4 men showed up at the fugitive's apartment pretending they were all going out for a meal together. But Xie, ever paranoid, sensed something was wrong and prepared to leave. The men decided to act immediately. The retired soccer player moved to block his path. Another man used a takedown maneuver to bring Xu to the ground. The others swarmed in, binding his hands and feet with leather belts. When the police finally arrived, they found Nathan Xu tied up and subdued. In his wallet, they found his New Zealand driver's license confirming his identity. The international manhunt was officially over. Later, Nathan Xu was extradited to New Zealand to stand trial. The 5 men who captured him received the $10,000 reward, but they chose to donate the entire sum to charity. They were hailed as heroes by the media and the Chinese community. On June 2, 2009, the trial for the murder of Annie Liu and the abandonment of Chloe Xu began at the High Court in Auckland. It was a long and complex case involving over 90 witnesses. Nathan Xu pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. He tried to argue that someone else was the killer. He claimed he only put the body in the trunk to hide it, and that he fled with his daughter to escape being framed. The defense's case hinged on the mixed DNA found on Annie's underwear. Recall that besides Xu's DNA, there were trace amounts from 2 other unidentified men. This introduced an element of uncertainty. On the tie used to strangle her, although Xu's DNA was present, a trace amount from another unknown male was also found. Based on this, Xu's defense lawyer presented a shocking and audacious theory. Pointing to Annie's blog and her online dating profile as evidence of her infidelity, he argued that she wasn't the victim of a premeditated murder. Instead, he suggested she may have died accidentally during a consensual but risky sexual encounter with other men. Perhaps, the lawyer posited, Annie didn't die in her home at all, but was accidentally asphyxiated during a threesome gone wrong, and the mysterious men, in a panic, placed her body in Xue's car to frame him. Forensic experts testified that DNA transfer can be indirect. Saliva droplets in the air can carry DNA, or it could have been mixed during a laundry cycle. They couldn't rule out that Annie had been in close contact with other men before her death. However, this could have happened at different times, and it did not exclude Xu's involvement in the crime. The prosecution painted a clear picture of a marriage defined by violence and jealousy, establishing a powerful motive. After weeks of testimony, on June 20, 2009, the jury of 12 delivered a unanimous verdict: guilty. On July 31, the Auckland High Court sentenced Nathan Xu to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 12 years. Xu was furious. He shouted in the courtroom that the verdict was an injustice, complaining that the all-female jury was biased against him. For years, he maintained his innocence. He wrote an autobiography in prison titled "I Am Not the Murderer," in which he painted a vile and derogatory picture of his late wife, Annie Liu. He steadfastly refused to admit his guilt. Then, in 2020, at the age of 66, Nathan Xu's attitude suddenly changed. He admitted to killing his wife, claiming it was because she had betrayed him and that he was filled with remorse. However, this confession conveniently came just as he was becoming eligible for parole after serving his 12-year minimum sentence. His intentions were transparent. A psychological assessment concluded he was still at a high risk of reoffending. His parole application was denied. The story of Nathan Xue and Annie Liu is a tragedy born from deception, desperation, and brutal ego. It's a story of a dream of a better life that curdled into a nightmare of abuse and control. But behind the consequences of crime, there is always a lesson. Whether Nathan Xu ever finds true remorse or not, His story stands as a chilling warning about the destructive power of rage and the irreversible consequences of our actions. Let it be a reminder that no matter what life throws at us, we always have a choice. Our decisions have a profound impact on the lives of others and on our own. It is in choosing compassion and respect over violence and control that we find the true path to peace.